Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Defiant Lawyers. I am attorney Augustus Corbett, and on the line with me, in this video, or on this live, is my daughter, attorney Chloe Corbett. Chloe, how are you?
I'm doing well. I hope everyone is doing well today. I am in a pretty defiant mood based on the topics we're going to be discussing today.
Very good. Um, I know things are going to get stirred up when you are in a defiant mood. So, so I'm glad about that. So let's hope everything is working well. We're waiting for someone to give us confirmation that things are going fine and that they can hear us well and see us well before we get started. So somebody please let us know. Let us know
Yes.
what you see.
Please let us know if the audio is good, if there's any feedback or echoing. We would greatly appreciate it because the topics that we have today are very serious and we want to make sure that you're able to hear everything that we're saying.
All right, so I got some confirmation that everything is good, so we're getting ready to get started. Um, we're going to jump right off to the races. We got about three, maybe four topics that we want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make it happen. So today's topics are one, we're going to give you an update on the Shelley Luther case. This is the lady who defied state and local orders to stay closed, keep her business closed. And the last time we talked, really much of nothing had been done to this woman, but something has happened now, a whole lot. So we're going to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to talk about the fact that COVID-19 police brutality continues around the country, especially it seems up in the Northeast, in the New York City and New Jersey areas. And I think even out in California, I've seen some police officers using excessive force toward African Americans. And third of all, and maybe most important today, is the Ahmaud Arbery case, that tragic case in Georgia. We're going to spend a great deal of time, I think, on that case. I think that's what got you all stirred up. Is that right?
It is. I can't wait to get into it and to express my feelings on this case and give some thorough legal analysis about it. I have a lot to say.
All right, very good. So we'll start with the first topic. And so the update as far as this is concerned is that Judge Eric Moyer in Dallas County, a civil court judge, found Miss Luther in contempt of court and he jailed her for 7 days.
Mhm.
Now that is a big development. And as
Wow.
far as far as I can tell, and the last that I heard, she is still in jail now. She got 7 days. So that's pretty big, Chloe.
It is. We talked about her case in the first episode of this live stream and kind of gave some predictions. We knew that at the time, a temporary restraining order had been issued against her. And we explained that what that was and said that soon a full hearing would be held to determine whether she was in contempt of court. Of course, we had no way to know that Judge Moyer was actually going to find her in contempt of court and sentence her to jail time. But I will tell you, it's gotten a lot of people stirred up, and that we were not surprised about. She has a lot of quote unquote supporters out here who have started all types of GoFundMe pages on her behalf. One such page I saw, she's raised close to $200,000 at as of this morning in support of her. So this is really a divisive issue when it really shouldn't because she violated the law. So it's to me it doesn't make any sense why she would have any supporters at all.
Well, one of the supporters she has is Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Yeah.
and he actually sent the judge a letter calling for the judge to immediately release Miss Luther from jail.
Yeah.
Now, the judge is an elected official, just like the AG is, and the judge is not bound by what the AG has called for. And so I doubt very seriously that the judge is going to acquiesce to the AG's call to release her.
Yeah, and in that statement where he called for the judge to release Shelley Luther, he shaded Dallas County as well, and kind of inferred that Dallas County was releasing violent criminals because of COVID-19, which is pretty funny because the judge who issued this is a civil judge. It has nothing to do with the criminal courts here in Dallas County. So to me, it's more about, trying to drum up conservative support for Ken Paxton on behalf of himself than what actually happened in the case, because he brought in things that had nothing to do with the facts of why Judge Moyet held her in contempt of court and ordered her to go to jail for 7 days.
It's a very
It's
good
politics
point.
as usual.
Very good point. And I would also point out that the AG was facing felony charges himself. I think he still may be. I'm not certain about that. So, he's not in a lot of position, in my opinion, to do a whole lot of, shall I say, ordering people to do things or calling for people to do things. And, you pointed out correctly that he shaded Dallas County, inferring basically, or stating, not inferring, it just outright said, the county was releasing violent criminals while locking up a mother who's trying to feed her children. No, that was not the reason the judge locked her up. The judge locked her up because she defied state and local orders.
Right.
Now, if it was an African American, who defied the law like that, I doubt very seriously, whether or not that the AG and other conservative supporters of Miss Luther would be all over everywhere raising money, etc. In fact, one particular case comes to mind, and that was the African American mother who put her child in a school out of her district because she wanted her child to get a good education.
Yeah.
Well, that particular mother went to prison.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't hear anything from AG Ken Paxton. I didn't hear anything from conservative folks. And all that mother was trying to do was get her child a decent education and get him out of a school district that was failing him.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like there's a big double standard here, Chloe.
A huge double standard and huge hypocrisy, which isn't surprising. But she has been sentenced to jail, and she's in jail as we speak right now. I believe also she was fined $500 per day up until May 8th. So she has also received fines from the judge as a result of her defiance of the law and Dallas County orders as well as state orders. So in my mind, justice has been served. Now, we said in that first podcast that we are small business owners. We know the effect that COVID-19 has had on small businesses, even our firm. So we get that, employers have to get out here and work, and they're worried about providing for their families. But at the same time, we will be defiant when there's a double standard. If an African American woman or minority had done the same thing, and whether she would receive the same amount of support from other Texans. So that's one thing that we wanted to point out too.
Yeah, and I would also point out that you, me, and your brother Caleb, we were jailed and had done nothing. Had done nothing. Hadn't done 1/10 of what this woman was done.
Yeah.
And so, what about equal protection under the law? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Yeah.
That's an old country saying.
I can infer what that means. I think, us millennials, we still know.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, without impugning the character of this woman, we understand the position that she was in. We are criminal defense attorneys.
Yeah.
So, we get it. But it's got to be equal across the board.
Right.
And so I would sum it up by saying white privilege didn't work this time.
Amen.
Amen?
I think that's a good summary. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next topic, because I know you're chomping at the bits to get to the next topic. And so the second topic is the fact that police officers are still taking occasion, misusing this COVID-19, these regulations of wearing a mask, social distancing, and et cetera. They are using that to brutalize people in the African American community. I've seen cases in Brooklyn. I've seen cases in Jersey City, New Jersey, which is up in that New York City area. And again, I saw an incident in California, I believe. And we just yesterday, in fact, let me put up this picture. At our last show, we put up this picture showing the fact that they were brutalizing black folks for not wearing masks, but then handing out masks to a bunch of white people. Now that there again is a double standard.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the case where, as we said on the show yesterday, that oftentimes African Americans are not given the benefit of doubt. As you see in the picture, police officers, instead of jumping to the conclusion of arresting those white citizens, they passed out masks. But with our African American community, especially black men, they're never given the benefit of the doubt. They're presumed always to be dangerous. And instead of, helping provide safety measures and health measures and protection and providing masks, they put them in handcuffs. I mean, that's the great contrast that we've seen in this country since the beginning of the country.
Exactly.
And I think that perfectly highlights the state that we're in today, the entire United States.
Yeah, in fact, we just did a consultation with a young man who was banking while black.
Yep.
We are most likely going to take his case, and we're going to be discussing his case on the show. Probably we'll have him on the show to talk about his ordeal. And you just contrast how this man was handled and how these white people were handled. And listen, that's part of the reason why I became a lawyer. Part of the reason I became a lawyer is to use the law, okay, to fight these injustices, okay? Like Thurgood Marshall, like Charles Hamilton Houston, like Benjamin Hooks, like Ben Crump, like others who are this new breed of lawyers who are out here saying, no, there is the 14th Amendment. We have protections under the law. And so, yes, we're definitely, probably going to take this brother's case. It broke my heart to look at the video. There is video of what happened with him. And incidentally, let me throw in, we are suing the theater that had us arrested.
We are.
That lawsuit will be filed in the next couple of weeks. They'll not get away with that. Yeah,
it's, the discrimination and racism that African Americans are facing have gone from, we still have institutional racism, but we're being brutalized and discriminated against while doing everyday activities, going to the movies, going to the bank, out jogging, which we'll discuss next with Ahmaud Arbery, doing everyday normal things, out picnicking, yet we're still brutalized, and they're still using it as a way to try to keep us on the bottom. And for those of us, everyone has a voice, and for those of us in the legal community who have been experiencing these brutalities, I feel like we have an onus to talk about it and bring it up and be defiant, which is why we called ourselves the Defiant Lawyers. So that's why we're using this platform as a way to bring light to these injustices, to analyze the legal situation so that everyday normal folks can understand, and to be the voice for those who are vulnerable and don't have a voice.
Exactly. So I guess that is a perfect segue into the third topic. And the third topic is having to do with the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. And I think you've taken somewhat of a deep dive into the facts of this case. So I'll defer to you to get us started on this.
So the case of Ahmaud Arbery has really come into the national scene through social media, particularly this week. But the case and his murder occurred 2 months ago in February. What happened was he was jogging in a Georgia neighborhood in Brunswick County, and according to his family and friends, he's an avid jogger. So you will often see him jogging through the neighborhood. On this particular morning, he was jogging past the house of a former DA investigator out of Brunswick County, Georgia, and his son. And according to them, they claimed that he matched the description of a suspect for some break-ins in the neighborhood. So they hopped in their truck. They followed behind him as he was simply jogging. And the son, Travis McMichael, shot him two times in the back, I believe. And it wasn't until this past week where the video of the shooting was released to, I think, a local news station in Georgia, and then it ended up on Twitter and other social media platforms. So that is why now the new Georgia DA for that county has announced that they will be taking the charges to a grand jury for review. But from what I can tell, of course, because of COVID-19, a local news station reported that down there, the grand jury proceedings will not start back until mid-June. So it might be at least another month before a grand jury even reviews the case. And as of right now, those two men still have not been charged.
Now, okay, and that's where I wanted to jump in. Okay, now we're licensed here in Texas. We don't know Georgia law, so some of what I'm about to say is somewhat speculation. But I do believe in that jurisdiction, the police officers could have gone to a magistrate or judge and gotten an arrest warrant based on just probable cause. You got a dead guy, you got a dead young man who's shot to death by two people. And all that I've seen so far that this young brother was doing was jogging, just jogging. It reminds me of Trayvon Martin. I mean, the facts are eerily similar to Trayvon Martin. Overzealous, likely racist white guys see a black guy running and assume that he is doing something untoward, something illegal.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, based on the facts that, is still developing, I don't know what's going to come out, but according to his attorney, Lee Merritt, and according to his mother, and the assailants haven't offered anything that contradicts the fact that he was just jogging in the community.
Yeah.
So it seems to me there is probable cause to get an arrest warrant and to have arrested these guys several months ago. Okay? Several months ago. Which brings us to the first issue in this case, because one of the things that I believe that they are arguing is the fact that they used self-defense against Mr. Arbery. Am I right about that?
That is right. And not only are they using it, but just to give a few more facts, two former district attorneys of that county had to recuse themselves from the case because of a conflict of interest. One of the former DAs said that they thought that this was a case of self-defense. And then the second DA who had to recuse herself thought that this was a case of citizen's arrest, which we're going to get to in a little bit. So they have taken the words of his murderers, and their connection to the
Well,
county.
I would say his alleged murderers.
Alleged murderers. You're right. You're right. Thank you. I'm getting carried away. Yeah,
I mean, there's hot passion about this case.
there is. There is.
And so they've not, as criminal defense attorneys, they've not been found guilty of murder yet, but allegedly.
Allegedly, right. So yes, self-defense is one of the first defenses that they're using.
Yes. And as you said, another defense that they're using or has been used on their behalf is this whole thing about citizens arrest. Okay. And which is legal in Texas, and it's also legal in Georgia. And we looked up the Georgia statute with about citizens arrest, and it's very similar to Texas statute. So let's discuss it a little bit here. I'm going to read it.
Okay.
It says, this is Georgia Code of Criminal Procedure, Chapter 4, Article 4, Section 17-4-60. All right, it says a private person may arrest an offender, underscore that word first and foremost, if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. Well, let's stop there. So you had two private people doing what the prosecutor said and what they claimed to be arresting an offender. Well, like I said 5 minutes earlier, there's no facts. There are no facts that have been offered thus far to say that this young man was an offender. But even if he was, the Georgia statute requires that the offense must have been committed in the presence of the private people or within their immediate knowledge. So if there was no offense committed, then obviously it couldn't have been committed in their presence because it wasn't committed at all. And they would not have had immediate knowledge if it never had been committed.
Yep.
So based on what has come out so far, they have not met the first part of this statute to constitute a citizen's arrest. Now, you told me before we got on the air that one of the things that you saw that was accredited to Lee Merritt, some comments he made on CNN, who I think is representing his family, is that either the prosecutor or the two assailants said that Mr. Arbery was looking in the window of a vacant house. Now, I don't know that to be true. We haven't confirmed that, but you said that that's what you read, right?
Yes, that's what I read that he said on an interview, and he being Lee Merritt, in response to a question on an interview. But he continued on and said that those allegations have not been corroborated, and he doesn't know if they're true. This is just what the assailants are claiming.
All right. So, and let's assume we have no corroboration, as you just said, that he was looking in the window of a vacant home. But let's assume it's true for the sake of argument. That's not a felony. And the Georgia statute goes on to say, if the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. So even if they saw him looking in the window, and we don't know that to be true, we're just to get through this statute, hypothetically, let's say it is true. That's not a felony to look in the window, not necessarily looking in the window, especially of a vacant house.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And once again, there's no proof that has been offered, according to Lee Merritt, to substantiate that.
And one thing I want to highlight, hypothetically, let's say that looking in the window is a felony. Um, they weren't given license to kill him. It says a private person may arrest an offender,
Excellent.
not
Excellent
kill
point.
them.
Excellent point.
So even if they had met the other elements of that definition, Georgia definition of citizens arrest, that it's called arrest for a reason, not kill. So far, based on the facts that we know, based on what has been put out, because of course we don't know a lot, but based on some of the speculation that has been put out, they have not met their burden to justify the killing of Ahmaud. And one other thing that I want to point out is they're not disputing that they actually killed him. They're trying to use the citizens arrest statute to justify their action.
And the self-defense statute.
And the self-defense, yeah.
Which I want to go back to. And I think you told me they're also using the stand your ground defense.
I read that somewhere in the news report, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to self-defense for a moment. Now, I've tried murder cases where we have used self-defense as a defense, okay? And so certainly a person has the legal right to defend himself or herself, as it may be. But there are some very strict requirements on most states' self-defense statute, including Texas and Georgia. And a couple of things that comes to mind is whether or not the shooter, the killer, was facing imminent danger. Imminent danger. I mean, imminent danger, not danger that's afar off, but whether or not that danger was imminent. Now, we have all seen the video. There's a video circulating, all right? And, you know, the guy who shot the video, the person who shot the video kind of got out of didn't catch everything, but they caught a part that shows, it appears that Mr. Arbery was jogging, and these guys one of them got out the truck, the other guy was in the back of the truck, it appears, almost like they were deer hunting. You know, yeah. I've deer hunted in my life, and it was almost like they were hunting a deer.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Arbery and one of the guys, I think maybe the son, I think it was the son maybe.
They've been reported as the son.
Okay, so they got into a tussle. Okay. And I understand why that tussle occurred from Mr. Arbery's standpoint, because he's being pursued. He's being chased down by two people with guns. What are you going to do? You're right. Going to try and save your life. He was out there fighting for his life.
Yeah.
Literally fighting for his life. And I think we heard 3 shots. Now, one of the things also necessary to use the self-defense statute is you can't be the aggressor. You can't be the aggressor. You can't be the one who gets it started and then kills someone and say it was self-defense.
Yep.
You put the other person in the position where he had to defend himself. In other words, self-defense, had Mr. Arbery came out of this alive, would have been more applicable to him than to the people who were pursuing him and chasing him down, which again reminds me of George Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yep.
This is kind of exactly what happened with Trayvon. He was minding his business, and old George started pursuing him. Old George was the aggressor, but then came back. His lawyer brilliantly argued and presented a case that Trayvon was the aggressor somehow, that he beat old George up, and therefore George was using self-defense. I'm telling you, I don't see that in this case. Okay.
You know, one thing that may help in this case is the fact that it was recorded. Now, like you pointed out in the video, some of the tussle got out of frame. But as we know with the Trayvon Martin case, there was no video whatsoever, and Trayvon was dead. He could not defend himself or offer counterfacts to what George Zimmerman was saying. So
That's
it was
true.
basically George Zimmerman's version of events versus nothing else to go against it. In this case, at least, there is some type of video to show, even if there was a scuffle. One other thing that most states' self-defense laws says is that the defensive force to defend yourself must be reasonable in response to the other initial force.
That's right.
Getting into a tough tussle and then pulling out a shotgun and shooting the quote unquote other aggressor 2 to 3 times, I would argue is not reasonable. And I would argue that it wasn't reasonable in this case.
Well, I would even argue, based on what you just said, you and I kind of go back and forth on some things here. Me being old school and you being millennial. So we have to sometimes just throw down the gauntlet and go for it.
Yep.
I give you I've told you I give you a daughter lawyer pass to go for it. Go for it. So here's where I would differ with something that you just said.
Okay.
You said that you said that the other aggressor. I don't see Mr. Arbery as an aggressor at all, based on what I've seen and heard. I think that he was actually defending himself from 2 men that were pursuing him with guns. And all that he was doing, based on the facts that have come out so far, all he was doing was jogging while black.
Yeah.
I wrote a Facebook post today and asked the question, what does jogging and getting shot to death have in common? And I answer my own question by saying nothing, unless you are a black man in Georgia or in the South or in most parts of America.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think
go ahead.
that's a good point. But if I were to put myself in if I were to put myself in the shoes of a defense attorney for the McMichaels, they're going to have to argue that Ahmaud Arbery was the initial aggressor. And I pointed out that I don't think that the force that they used in their quote unquote self-defense claim was reasonable, but they're going to have to argue that it was reasonable. I read a report that they're trying to claim that they told Ahmaud to stop, like, we just want to talk to you. And then that's when he started the initial tussle. I take those with a grain of salt. But if I were his defense attorney, that is where the facts that I would rely on to show that they do, in fact, have a self-defense claim.
Point well taken. Point well taken. Point well taken. I mean, this is what we do. And if I step in the shoes of the defense attorney for the assailants, you're absolutely right. And there's another thing that I would argue as well. Mm-hmm. And that is that when you use the self-defense statute, it is a subjective standard. It's not objective. It's not what a reasonable person would do. It's not what the prosecutor would do, what the judge would do, what even the jury members would do. It is what a person would do in that situation. Yeah. And so, yes, if we were criminal defense lawyers for this gentleman, for this person, I won't call him a gentleman because he's potentially a murderer, allegedly. Yeah. But if we were representing him, then yes, we would say, look, you all can sit in that box and second guess this man all you want to. But just as Mr. Arbery was fighting for his life, this man was fighting for his life. Are the names McMichael?
I think it's McMichael. Yeah. The last name. Mm-hmm.
Right. So Mr. McMichael was fighting for his life, and somebody was not going to make it out of this alive. And Mr. McMichael just happened to have been the person to walk away here, but it could have very easily been him had Mr. Arbery gotten his gun. And so that would have been our argument, right? Yes. Okay. You're right about that. So thank you for getting me over into the shoes of a criminal defense lawyer that we are.
Yeah.
But, and I've never been a prosecutor. I am proud that I've never been a prosecutor. I can say that I've never sent anybody to prison or to jail. Now, that said, I know some very fine prosecutors. You were a prosecutor, and I encouraged you to become a prosecutor. In fact, we need, justice-minded prosecutors definitely in the prosecutor's office. So I said that tongue in cheek. But, again, I would, from what I see, just based on the facts, as a father, as an African-American man, I don't see him being the aggressor. I see him as having gotten murdered merely for jogging in that community. And I know you agree with me on that, but some back and forth makes these things interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? You bring up a good point too, Dad. If we're going to put in ourselves in the defense attorney standpoint, if we were defending these men about how it's a subjective standard, that's why so many of these cases, when they're taken to trial, the person who is the alleged murderer are found not guilty. We saw that in George Zimmerman. We see that in a lot of these police brutality cases where, police officers have murdered Black men and women. It's because the law states, just like you said, that it is a subjective standard, and the jurors have to put themselves in the position of the defendant. That's right. So it's really the law that needs to change, because it is allowing them in many of these states to make these arguments that is not what a reasonable person would do. It's not what, like you said, the judge or you would do, is what that person in the moment did if they truly felt, fear for their life.
Well, you said the law needs to change. I don't know, because, if I'm put in a situation where I got to defend myself, I'm certainly going to do it. Or if I got to defend you or someone else that I love and care for or care about. In fact, the law here in Texas, and I saw it is true also in Georgia, it doesn't have to be somebody you love, just a third party. You can use deadly force to defend a third party. That happened down in Houston. This man shot two people who were robbing somebody else's house, a neighbor's house. He shot and killed both of them with a shotgun. But I don't know if the law needs to be changed, because if you're defending yourself, you should have the same right, and it should be based on what you were feeling and thinking at the time, and your life is in danger. I think what limits that subjective standard, as you pointed out, though, is whether or not it's still reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if somebody's trying to rob your house and they, instead of coming in, when you tell them to go away, they turn around and start running down the street, and then you get in your car and go run and chase them down and shoot them. Okay, now that's unreasonable. Yeah. Because you're not in imminent danger there. And no matter what your subjective thinking was, that's probably not going to fly unless you're a white guy shooting a black guy. Then it may work. Yeah. Okay. Or if you're a white police officer shooting a black guy. And that's let me say this. That is the reason why a whole lot of white police officers get off killing black people too, because of this subjective standard. They will get, an expert to come and who's an expert, so-called expert in the use of deadly force in police type situations. And they will just sit there and just make it look like there was nothing else that officer could do. It was a split-second decision. You shouldn't be second guessing these officers who are out here protecting us, et cetera, et cetera. And there you go, a not guilty verdict. But you know, I do applaud the citizens of Dallas County who have been holding police officers accountable, right?
Yep, you took my words. I was about to highlight that. That case, man, it's slipping my mind now.
Amber
Amber Geiger. Yes.
Geiger, yeah.
Yes. One of the few police officers in the country in the past, in several decades, that have been held accountable for, shooting and killing someone as an officer. So I do applaud the citizens of Dallas County too.
Yes, we're setting the standard there, and I'm glad about that. Well, another topic, Chloe, that will come up most likely is the topic of stand your ground with respect to these gentlemen. I'm sure, I don't know the Georgia statute of stand your ground. We do have that here, okay? If you're at work, if you're in your vehicle, if you're at home, and you're not doing anything illegal and so forth, you don't have to retreat. It basically gets rid of the retreat requirement. You don't have to turn and run. You know, there used to be a time under the law where even at your house you had to retreat and try to back up and all that and get away and all that. They got rid of that. And so I presume, I'm not a Georgia lawyer, but I presume Georgia has a similar statute. And I think you told me that you'd read where they were using the stand your ground statute.
I saw that in an article that I read. I don't remember what source, but it wouldn't surprise me if they try to use the stand your ground law as well. We know that the stand your ground law was a huge reason why George Zimmerman was acquitted as well out in Florida. So, you know, Georgia is right there near Florida, and yeah, it wouldn't surprise me as well.
So another thing too that you pointed out in our discussion before the show today is whether you wonder whether there's probable cause. You wonder whether there was probable cause for these guys to even initiate a citizen's arrest because the Georgia statute, and I'm going to read it again, the latter part of it says if the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. So it doesn't use the word probable cause, but it sounds similar. I don't know how Georgia courts interpret that, but assuming that it's similar to probable cause, do you think there was probable cause for these two men to think that Mr. Arbery was doing something illegal?
No, I don't, because from all reports, all Mr. Arbery was doing was jogging outside of a neighborhood, and like the citizens arrest statute says, a private person can arrest another person if offense was committed in their view or they had immediate knowledge of it. Jogging outside in a neighborhood, to our knowledge, is not a crime. We know it's not a crime here in Texas, and it shouldn't be a crime there in Georgia. So no, I don't believe that they have probable cause to initiate any type of citizen's arrest.
Well, tell the audience what probable cause is.
So probable cause is a criminal standard that allows officers to either arrest a person or conduct a search warrant. And all it is that they have some facts that lend to suspicion that a crime has been committed.
That's right.
And it's a pretty low standard. There's a low standard called reasonable suspicion. Probable cause is just above reasonable suspicion that there's some facts that the officer has come across to lend the officer to have suspicion that a crime has been committed. Here, to our knowledge, there are no facts that Mr. Arbery had committed any crime, and so in my mind, they would not meet that standard of probable cause.
So all right. So let's assume some of the things that we've heard, some of the facts and circumstances that we've heard about this case, and this is all hearsay, we don't
Speculation. Yeah.
speculation. Yeah, we don't
Hypotheticals.
hypotheticals. We don't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I read where they're claiming that there had been some burglaries in the vicinity, and that Mr. Arbery was he fit the description of someone who had done some burglaries or a burglary. Now, had you read that too?
I had read that too.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's assume we don't have any evidence whatsoever that burglaries were committed, that he fit the description or anything else. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, let's assume that there had been some burglaries, and let's assume that he fit the description of a person who had been seen committing the burglaries or suspected of committing the burglaries. Do you think there would have been probable cause then?
No, because there would have to be some facts that connected Mr. Arbery to the alleged break-ins that have been happening. From everything that has been reported, all that he was doing was jogging outside, and they were in their home. Somehow they saw him outside, and because they claim he fit some type of description, they got in their truck after him.
Well, let's put it on the table, okay? This sounds like racial profiling. So you said facts that connect Mr. Arbery to this matter. Well, what about the fact? Well, let's assume that the person who committed the burglaries is a black guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we have no corroboration that any burglaries were committed, who did it, or any of that. We're just for the sake of having this discussion. So if the hypothetical burglar was black and Mr. Arbery was black, would that be enough for probable cause? Say that so those in the back can hear that.
No, there would not be any probable cause, simply because Mr. Arbery has the same skin color of the alleged perpetrator of the break-ins in that neighborhood.
But Chloe, all right, now let's get real. That's the legal analysis, but let's get real. Let's get real here. There are a lot of people who see black men as criminals just because they are black men. And there are a lot of people on grand juries, a lot of people in regular juries who subconsciously got those types of biases and prejudices and racism, who will, in their minds, see these men as doing the right thing because in their minds, Mr. Arbery, it was reasonable to think that Mr. Arbery committed some burglaries because merely he was a black man.
Well, that's the injustices of the legal system.
Okay.
That's something that we have contended with since, the U.S. Constitution was written and, state statutes have been written. That is what is so frustrating and upsetting about these types of cases, because when you're dealing with a case like this, it's like you're fighting against the entire legal system as a whole. It's like we have to indict the legal system itself.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So what do we do about it?
As attorneys, we have to continue to educate the public. We know that people are going to, when they come into these grand juries, when they come into these petite juries to sit on these cases, they're going to come in with their biases. First of all, before even education, we have to eliminate them from even being on a jury in the first place. And that's something that we do as defense attorneys. When we select juries, we try to weed out the people who express these implicit and explicit biases.
Well, before we even get to the jury trial, what about, in this case, just getting somebody arrested? Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't this again remind you of Trayvon Martin, where the family did everything they could, and local law enforcement and the DA, the court system there, would not arrest George Zimmerman? And it was really not until Al Sharpton started going down there and bringing a whole lot of attention to the thing before they even arrested old George.
Yeah.
So before we even get to the jury trial, just getting somebody arrested for killing a black person is infuriating, because oftentimes it is so hard just to get that done.
Yeah.
And then even after you get them arrested and you exhale, like, okay, we got that done. Now you got to take another deep breath, because you got to get a grand jury to indict the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it really starts with law enforcement, because they're the ones who are out there enforcing the laws and then making these arrests. So we have to make sure that we get, elected sheriffs, and make sure that there's bias training with law enforcement officers. Make sure that we really dig in to weed out the ones who have had, a record of these racist arrests, racist attacks against African Americans. So we really have to dig into the police departments.
You're absolutely right. And I think that is the reason why we here in Dallas County have been able to get some justice in these types of cases, because we have a black DA, we have a black sheriff, a black police a black police chief. We have a bunch of black judges.
Yep.
We have a lot of black people who live in Dallas County who sit on these grand jury panels. Yep. So basically, if we're not in the game, if we're
Yep.
not sitting at the table, we don't get justice.
Yep. That's why these local elections are so important. That's why the elections, electing the district attorneys, electing these local judges and county judges, electing sheriffs. It has to be a grounds up approach to get us a seat at the table, because that's the only way that change will occur, is when we're at the table as well, helping making these decisions, helping writing these laws, and enforcing the arrests too.
Amen. Amen. I mean, I think I know I read, I don't know how true it is, that P. Diddy is once again saying that he's gonna hold up the black vote if the Democrat Party doesn't do this or that. Now, I understand what he's trying to say if he said it.
Yeah.
I understand that the Democrat Party tends to take the black vote for granted. I get that. But holding up the vote is never the solution.
No.
That is wrong-headed, okay? And if he's trying to use the threat of trying to hold up the black vote as a way to get Democrats to take black folks seriously, it could backfire, because the message can get out to a whole lot of black folk that P. Diddy is saying not to vote.
Yeah.
Okay? So the unintended consequence could be that he really does affect the vote. And as you pointed out, if we're not voting on the local level, on the state level, on the national level, I mean, voting for dog catcher, voting for tree remover, county commissioner, school officials, all of that. If we're not involved and at the table, we get messed around.
Yeah.
So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We have hi Diana. She asked a question that I want to ask you, okay?
Okay.
On the topic of elected officials, she said, what is the best way to research the values, decisions, and character of locally elected officials like DA, judges, etc.? So it's a really great question.
So how to do your research on them?
Yeah.
Well, for DAs and judges specifically?
Yeah,
is that the question? For DAs and judges specifically? Well, a lot of DAs come up through the prosecutor's office. Okay, not all of them, but a lot of them. And a great number of them also have been, at least here in Dallas County, have been judges, right? And so there are folks out in the community who knows their record as judges, as prosecutors, okay? And so you get to talking to folks in the community. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
They'll let you know. We were at a meeting. We were at sort of a town hall meeting that DA John Cruzo did, and everyone was happy to hear all of his social justice agenda. But there was this one dude.
I remember.
You remember him? There was this one guy who couldn't wait to get to the microphone so that he could talk about the fact that Cruzo had sent him to prison for 25 years or 18 years or something for something he claimed he didn't do. Now, I don't know how true that was, but the community will tell you. So that's a good starting place, the community. And then, you always got Google, that you can just Google people and try to, find out what their record is all about. When they're campaigning, clearly you can attend their town hall meetings, campaign meetings. And if it's question answer type thing, ask them pointed questions, to find out information. So there are varied ways, a whole lot of ways of finding out what their record is. And it's a great question, because before you vote for a DA or a judge, you need to know as best as you can what their record is all about. A lot of judges, for example, have been prosecutors, and they get on the bench with that prosecutor's mindset. Okay, they are state oriented. All right, and so they're just a little bit bent in that direction. All right. Now, we're just telling the truth here, okay? They're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be fair, but we're human. And sometimes we just have a certain bent, a certain bias, a certain way of seeing things. And after you've been on the bench, for a long time, after you've been a prosecutor for a long time, seeing all the dark side of humanity, it can be quite difficult getting on the bench and then all of a sudden being neutral. And understanding of some person who's accused of doing a crime. Now, some people can do it, but it can be difficult. Just keeping it real.
Yeah, I agree. So I think what you said was so important is getting out in the community and seeing what these elected officials' reputation and record truly is and truly are. A lot of these elected officials, they'll host town halls like the one that we attended, and you get pretty close to them. You can ask them pointed questions. You can see how they respond to your questions. Oftentimes, you can determine a person's character by the way they respond to a tough question. So getting out in the community, doing intense research, going on Google, going on their campaign websites can get you a pretty good idea of what their values and character are. So we appreciate the question, Diana. She said,
absolutely.
Thank
you. Yes. Wonderful. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any yet. If you all have any questions, please feel free to enter them here in this watch party or on my dad's live, and we'll get to them if we have a chance.
Well, we have finished talking about all the issues that we wanted to discuss regarding Mr. Ahmaud Arbery. We talked about self-defense, citizen's arrest, stand your ground, probable cause, grand juries, and racism. And I guess we're in on the point of racism. That's why we put it last here. Yeah. And my eyes begin to well up with water when I think about the issue of racism, because as it relates to the criminal justice system and so on, because we're exhausted by this point.
Yeah.
Many of us suffer from PTSD just from being black. every day, even if we don't deal with big racist moments, we have to contend with a whole lot of microaggressions from the white community. It could be a stare. It could be a look.
Yep.
It could be a finger. It
Yep.
could be the N-word. It could be getting followed around in a store. It could be all kinds of stuff. Every day, especially as a black man, I've dealt with it all my life. All of my life, and dare I say, unless I stay home, I deal with it daily. At least one or two instances where I just have to just suck it up and walk away, because the moment, if I stand there like we did last year and
Yeah.
if we stand there and voice our complaint and the police is called, you're automatically looked upon as the criminal. And the system goes against you from the jump street. And you could be an outstanding citizen. You could be a lawyer. You could be a pastor. You could be a scientist. I saw a medical doctor get arrested down in Florida who was out trying to help folks who were suffering from COVID-19. All because he's black. So at every instance, we deal with just this both blatant racism and this more subtle racism, the microaggressions that we deal with. We just know the system is against us, and there is contempt for our skin color by so many folks in the white community. I would say, and I'm glad that I thought about it, with Mr. Arbery, there have been some white Southern Baptist ministers who have come out in support of Mr. Arbery. And it is such a blessing. It's so refreshing. It's so encouraging when our white brethren, especially the Christian brethren, stand up and just say, no, this is wrong. No one should get shot to death for merely jogging in a community. That shouldn't happen. And so I was blessed that there have been some few white Christians, and those are the ones that I expect to take a stand, because they know what the Bible says about injustice. And unfortunately, so many of them, though, see the Bible through a white male prism, okay, from a white male perspective, that they don't even see all the references to justice in the scriptures. But Jesus was all about justice, and he was completely against racial injustice. So, but if you have a certain prism, if you're used to this white male hegemony and dominance, then you're not going to see the justice scriptures. You're going to see all the other ones, okay? But there are some, praise God. For example, during slavery, there were the abolitionists. Thank God for them. They stood on the word of God, and they fought and fought and fought, despite being called every kind of name. They fought to end slavery. And there are white Christians like that in every generation. It seems, though, that in this Trump era, many of them have gone silent. So that's why I was so happy to hear this couple of folks, these white Southern Baptists, those are the only ones I've heard about so far, who have come out and expressed some outrage on Mr. Arbery's behalf.
Wow. I really, truly could not have said it better, Dad. I think the point that you brought up about the microaggressions, that's honestly what really gets to me, even personally. Being out at a restaurant and getting bad service because you're black.
Exactly.
Simply shopping and being followed around because you're black.
That's right.
The assumption that you're not as educated or not as articulate.
That's right.
The assumption that, I mean, all of these negative
All of
connotations that we
this.
deal with, all of it.
You're at the bank and it takes them 30 minutes to verify your check or something, and the white person in front of you gets through in 30 seconds with no questions asked.
Yep.
All that sort of stuff.
All of it. We're tired of it. And I think that is now why every time something like what happens with the Ahmaud Arbery case, with any of these police brutality cases, we jump up and we speak about it. And I'm so glad that we now have a platform through social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media, for us to stand up and to speak about it. Because for so long, the average black person could not just speak out about it. We had our leaders, which we are so thankful for, but now anyone could get online and voice their opinion and be heard. So I, for one, I'm not going to stand for it anymore. I'm going to continue to speak up because that's how you and mom have raised me and Caleb, to speak up for injustice, to speak up against bullies and those who take advantage of other people. We look at it from a biblical standpoint.
That's right.
And now that's the major. We
That's
were
the
taught,
foundation.
That's the foundation, because we were taught the totality about the word.
Amen. Yeah,
Justice.
I like that. Yes, that's right.
And I think what has happened with a lot of white American and white Christians in this country, they've tried to use the Bible to justify their own bad actions. And the people who really understand what the word is and who Christ is about, they know that he would never stand for any of that. So I just take that perspective that you and mom have taught me all of my life, and I put it into the way that I practice law as well. And it gives me, the confidence, even when I'm not, to speak out, because I know that the truth that you all have taught us will back us up no matter
Amen.
what.
Praise God.
So,
Amen. Yeah. And when you speak of bullies, we're coming to a close, but when you speak of bullies, wow, some of the biggest bullies I've ever seen wear badges.
Yeah.
Okay. Many of them just have pure contempt for the black community. Okay. They lump us all together. And there are some bad actors in the black community, but there are bad actors in every community. Okay. And that's one of the things that we try to do when we're practicing law and we're defending people. We like to get to know that person's story, that person's background, what led up to that person making the decision to do whatever we're defending him against, if it was done. And because oftentimes, nothing happens in a vacuum. It's contextual. Yeah. Some folks, I looked at a movie last night, in fact, I think All Day and All in One Night or something, a Netflix movie. A very good movie that shows you, I can't think of the actor's name. I know one actor is Jeff Wright, who played, Jeff Wright, I think he played the role of, he was in Shaft.
The old Shaft, the one with Samuel L. Jackson.
The first one with Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, okay.
He was the Hispanic. He played a Hispanic guy.
Oh, okay.
But he's played other roles too. He played Muddy Waters also in Cadillac Records. Okay. Jeff Wright. And then this other young man, this young up and coming actor, he was like the lead character. I think he was in the movie Moonshine. I think he also was in Denzel Washington's movie Equalizer 2, if you remember that movie. He's a great actor, and he also played. He was also in the movie about the rap group that has Method Man and and Rizzo. What? Who are they? Who are they, Chloe?
Wait, you kind of broke up. I heard Method Man and RZA.
Yeah. What is the rap group that? Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah. He played one of the roles in that movie about Wu-Tang Clan as well. Anyway, the movie just showed he played the character of a young man who was raised in who was born in a horrible situation, raised in a horrible situation, and how all of that just really led him to prison, basically, for murdering two people. He was a good kid. He tried to do everything he could not to get on that road, but the circumstances of his life just pushed him in that direction. And then he wasn't raised in church. He wasn't raised to know Christ. And that's huge, because I grew up in some difficult situations, not as difficult as some other people. Thank God I had, my father, my mother, but the neighborhood and the community that I lived in, you could have easily gone in the wrong direction. But I got to know Christ as a little boy, and because of my knowledge of Christ as a kid, that kind of restrained me, even when the devil was pulling me. So we try to just get to know. I went through all that to say we try to get to know our clients, because oftentimes there's a story, and we try to get the judge and the prosecutor to understand there is a story here. Had they been raised like you, probably in that middle-class family, in that middle-class community, in those good schools, two-parent family and all that, then they probably wouldn't be here.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Okay. I've raved enough and ranted enough today.
Me too.
So I enjoyed it, Chloe. I hope you did.
I did as well. I love these, the episodes that we're doing. I love these topics and speaking with them with you. It's great.
Well, and most importantly, I hope that the folks who are watching enjoyed it as well. Please hit the share button, and please host a watch party, please, so that we can get the word out to as many people as possible. Chloe, if there's nothing else, have a good one.
You too. Y'all take it easy. This has been the Defiant Lawyer Show. Stay good, everyone.
Bye-bye.